John Campbell, also known as Papa Buzz, grew up in Wellesley, Massachusetts. He's the grandfather of a fellow Wayland student, Taylor Freeling. In 1962, he was on deck for the Cuban Missile Crisis. He served in the Navy for 5.5 years. He currently lives in Wayland, Massachusetts, and he was able to share his story with us. The Cuban Missile Crisis, also known as the October Crisis, was a 13-day confrontation in October 1962 between the Soviet Union and Cuba on one side and the United States on the other side. In October 1962, an American spy plane photographed nuclear missile sites being built by the Soviet Union and Cuba. Kennedy didn't want the Soviet Union and Cuba to know that he was aware of the missiles. Kennedy had many meetings debating what to do. Finally, he decided to place a naval blockade around Cuba. This blockade was to help prevent the Soviets from bringing in military supplies. Kennedy also ordered the removal of the missiles already there and the destruction of the sites. Both the Cuban leader and Kennedy realized how devastating a nuclear war would be. They agreed that the Soviets would dismantle the weapon sites in exchange for a pledge from the United States not to invade Cuba. In another deal, the U.S. agreed to remove its nuclear missiles from Turkey. The Soviets removed their missiles from Cuba, but they continued to build their military arsenal. In 1963, there was a lessening of tensions between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. President Kennedy told Americans in June 1963, "For, in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air, we all cherish our children's future, and we all are mortal." This is John Campbell explaining to us his service in the Cuban Missile Crisis. When were you born?
1935.
And how was your childhood growing up?
Terrific.
And where did you grow up?
Wellesley. Went to Wellesley High School.
And where did you go to college?
Rensselaer. Engineering school. And then I got a master's degree at university.
And what made you decide to join the Navy?
Well, I got one of those full Holloway scholarships. It's like going to the Naval Academy, but you went to one of 52 other colleges, and you got a regular commission in the Navy. And I decided to go Naval Air. So I was a ASW carrier pilot. The pilots that were involved in the missile crisis.
And did you have any other family members or friends in the Navy?
My brother was he was a ground pounder. He was in for 2 years. Yeah.
How old were you when you joined?
21.
So were you still in college, or was it right after?
Well, we graduated and got commissioned the same day, and then got married the next day.
How'd you feel when you joined the Navy?
I really liked it. I always wanted to be a naval test pilot, so I didn't do that. I ended up not doing that for reasons, but anyway, I always wanted to be a Navy pilot.
And so, do you just want to explain like what your part in the Cuban Missile Crisis was, like before and?
Yes, I was scheduled to be the officer in charge of the first detachment of VS-27, which was dispatched in mid-October to Guantanamo Bay to run surveillance of the merchant ships as they would have come in. And one of our primary missions was to watch the submarines that were accompanying the merchant ships, because those were the warships. There were no warships other than missile submarines, Russian boomers, but my orders came through. I had resigned from the Navy, and I was going to go to work for a company in Pennsylvania, and so I got out about 2 or 3 weeks before the early October when the action started. Okay. So I didn't actually fly. I had all my buddies in and so I've heard stories over the years of
what were some of those stories?
Well, they were flying round the clock they were flying 8 hours. Well, we would fly for 4 to 5 hours, and they'd be up for 4 or 5 hours, and then they'd be resting for 8 hours and back up. And they did this for about 30 days.
Oh, wow.
So it was very grueling flying.
Yeah.
And the weather wasn't so bad, though.
That's good.
Mm-hmm. And they were flying out of Guantanamo Bay.
Okay.
Gitmo.
And so how old were you when the crisis began?
Let's see. Probably 26.
So did you understand what was happening during the crisis and what was happening before? Like, were you informed?
Oh, yes. Because I had very, very detailed briefings from ComNav Land. That's Commander Naval Air Force's Atlantic Fleet in Norfolk, Virginia. NAS Norfolk. That's Norfolk Naval Air Station.
What were those briefings about? Just what was going on, or?
About the whole strategy, what we thought were the strategies that the Russians were using to install the missiles in Cuba, and then what was going on we weren't briefed on what was going on in the White House, but we kind of had a feeling of what was going on in the White House.
And so what exactly was the role of an aircraft carrier during the crisis?
Well, we were flying out of Guantanamo Bay. I don't recall that there may have been aircraft carriers, but the more likely would have been attack carriers with attack airplanes. There weren't carriers close by.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of destroyers and cruisers, heavy cruisers. We who were normally flying off carriers, our squadron, not me, but our squadron was flying out of Guantanamo Bay.
Do you remember any specific moments during the crisis in the weeks leading up before you left the Naval?
Really only the briefings. And then my orders came out and I was out before the action started.
So were you, like, once you found out about the action, were you happy that
I was reading the New York Times and watching TV like everybody else.
Yeah. So were you happy that you left before it happened?
And scared, because we knew at the time that we were about, as a country, to come to the closest of a nuclear exchange.
Yeah. Were your friends
It was scary. And of course, I knew more than most because I had been in the briefings.
Yeah. So did you know people that were still in the Navy during the
Oh yeah, our squadron. I knew all of our squadron. They were all of these people. All of these people were. I mean, I was one of a few that was in this picture that wasn't there.
Yeah.
This whole group of pilots, planes, crew were in Guantanamo Bay.
Okay.
Yeah. So I heard a lot of stories afterwards.
You did?
I don't remember yet. That was 50. I'm in touch with 2 of those pilots who are retired admirals. 3 of them. There are 3 retired admirals out of that group.
So looking back, were you glad you joined the Navy?
Oh yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, definitely.
So how many years did you serve in total?
5.5.
Wow. What made you decide to stop serving in the Navy, or were you just...
Well, I was selected. I had a chance to go into the astronaut program.
Oh, wow.
And going to test pilot school at Patuxent River. But one weekend I went home and said, honey, I think we should be going up to test pilot school in Patuxent River because I'd had a shot at being an astronaut. She said, no. So I decided if I couldn't do that, I was going to get out.
Yeah.
Which was really a good decision.
John Campbell played a significant role in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Although he didn't actually partake in the crisis, he was supposed to be the one man in charge if he didn't resign beforehand. He was strongly involved with the briefings before the crisis evolved. He was an average American living in Wellesley, Massachusetts that decided he risked his life for 5.5 years and is an American hero that still remembers his glory days.